Hello everyone, I'm Heath, and in this video we're going to be going through some more of the notes that I took on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition when I was developing a medieval Cthulhu Mythos RPG with Infinite Black. So I had made a number of different notes about some of my concerns or thoughts about the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons when we were trying to decide what system we were going to go with or if we were going to try to develop our own. And in this video specifically, we are talking about tracking wounds individually. And really, I'm not sure why this isn't something that hasn't caught on more in Dungeons & Dragons and other RPGs in general, because it seems like in most hit point based RPGs, you've got this chunk of hit points, whether it's inflationary or not. We've talked about that in other videos. And then you're going to be losing those points by being hit with pole axes and great axes and, potentially drowned in some cases, or hit with fireballs or stabbed with daggers or whatever. And rather than having individual wounds that you're having to deal with, all of those injuries are just kind of morphing together into one big loss of hit points that are trying to go against your main hit point total. And of course, that is simple. It is easy, and so I can understand why it does make sense, but I still think that more RPGs would be tracking wounds individually. And this is actually something that I really like about Hackmaster. And I bring up Hackmaster quite a bit. It's one of the 3 RPGs that I think about quite a bit when I'm thinking about the development of RPGs. The 3 that I think of the most are GURPS, 4th edition, Hackmaster, and then also Fate, actually. So those are 3 systems that I really like, and it actually surprises people that I like Hackmaster as much as I do, because I tend to be much more storytelling focused, and when you're talking about Hackmaster, it's a much more crunchier rule system, it's a much more old school kind of rule system, and so people are surprised that I like it. But it does have elements that I do like, and one of them is the tracking of wounds individually. So this is what I typed up and sent in to the whole development team on the subject. Tracking wounds individually. Instead of deducting hit points from one general pool, each wound is kept track of individually. This lets you know how many minor wounds or how many major wounds that you have. It should matter if you get hit for 6 points of damage in a single hit, or if you take 6 one-hit point wounds. I think it should. If the goal is to make fights more dramatic and have greater impact on the story, this should be significant. Then healing magic could actually be something that would take care of what kind of wound it was. We talked about in the video on the general hit point debate that was one of the issues that I always had with previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons. Like, what exactly is a light wound if you are casting Cure Light Wounds? So in this case, a Cure Light Wounds might be able to heal up to 1d6 points of damage, but only to wounds that were no more than 2 points of damage or less, or something like that. To take care of a single larger wound would require greater magic, which may not be available. So then you could look at this particular wound was caused by a great axe or something, and it was 10 points of damage. That may exceed the ability of Cure Light Wounds to heal, and so you would need greater magic. I don't know if my example here with Cure Light Wounds being able to heal d6 damage, but only to wounds that are 2 points or less is really a good one. But I think the idea when I type this up is that, well, then it seems like this spell has a pretty good chance of completely curing a light wound, because only a 1 would only half close it, right? But I would still want to work through a bunch of things like that. The point is, you're tracking wounds individually, and that lets you understand what type of trauma the characters had and what potential kinds of magic would allow you to heal it, and also natural healing. It could also make tending to wounds with more normal means require different rolls as well. Because if you did want to get more sophisticated, you could not only track how many points each wound was, but then whether it was done by a slashing, piercing, or a bludgeoning weapon. And then different potential types of healing, whether it's magical or herbal or something like that, may apply to different types of damage as well. That may be getting too complex. Because I was asked in a YouTube comment, we're talking about reducing randomness, but how do I feel about complexity versus simplicity? And that's something that I've still got to feel out. My general idea is to go simpler in order to expand my player base. That's the general idea, because I have a lot of people in my friends and family circle who are willing to play rather advanced board games and enjoy those, but they don't make the leap to go on to RPGs. And so if I had an RPG that was a little bit simpler, I would be able to expand the number of people who would be enjoying the game and able to play with me. But that's just kind of my general thought right now. This kind of idea with wound tracking, that does kind of go in definitely the more complex direction, and it may be too much. So all of this is just talking things out. It's not intended to be any type of final system. These were just my notes that I came up with, and I decided to make this video series basically to just talk them out, to talk myself through them, and then also I've really been enjoying the feedback in the comments that people have been providing, because it seems like people have, generally speaking, been very positive, and by positive I mean constructive and extending the conversation, even if they disagree with what I'm saying in any video, which is, of course, perfectly fine. Let's go over here to Hackmaster, and so we can see something about healing time here, because I do think that natural healing should probably take a little bit longer too, because actually, this is probably a good time to talk about this as well. I did have notes on slower natural healing, rather than trying to do a whole other video on this, because right now I said 5th edition is very generous with getting back hit points, since they can be recovered with rest, and hit dice can even be used to get them back faster. I think that could be slowed down. But one advantage of multiple wound tracking system would be that wounds could heal in tandem. So if you have multiple smaller wounds, for instance, they can all heal together at the same time. I think that in general, 5th edition is very kind to the players, allowing them to recover a lot of their hit points and other spells and abilities and whatever relatively quickly. That has advantages. It also has disadvantages. The only time when I recall really being in a lot of danger and losing characters is when we forgot to rest, basically. If we didn't rest and we just pressed on, that was bad. Every time we'd been able to rest, you have a lot of resources restored to you in 5th edition. I am at least potentially okay with physical damage being something that is much more significant, and it might require more time to heal from. So let's take a look at what Hackmaster is doing here. And remember, Hackmaster is tracking wounds individually. Healing time. Without the intervention of divine aid or first aid, each wound heals in a number of rest days based on the number of damage suffered. Thus, a 4-point wound takes 4 days of rest to regain a hit point and become a 3-point wound. After 3 more days of rest, another hit point returns and the injury becomes a 2-point wound. So then, I suppose natural healing could take care of larger wounds, heal them down to something that's like a light wound, and then magic could step in at that point if that was all the magic that you had. Note, however, that individual wounds heal in parallel. Thus, a character with 4 individual 5 hit point wounds recovers in the same time as a character with a single wound of the same severity. For instance, let's postulate that Urgaz, the dwarf, suffers a brigand attack. He takes 3 wounds in that scrape, one which causes 3 points of damage, one that causes 5 points, and another trifling injury of just 1 HP. Without access to first aid or curative magic, Urgaz needs to recuperate for 6 days on account of the 3-point wound. 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 6. 15 days for the 5-point wound. 5 plus 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 15, and 1 day for the 1-point wound. Of course, since all the wounds heal simultaneously, Urgaz should be completely healed in 15 days. While this may entail an extended period of downtime for characters suffering grievous injuries, you can take comfort in the fact that your wounds heal simultaneously. And of course, that's what some people won't like. Some players and game masters will want characters to be able to take lots and lots of damage and be just fine the next day. Suits their playstyle, and that's perfectly fine. So speeding up healing time, injured characters under the care of a first aid provider heal their wounds faster. This takes 2 forms, critical care and nursing. Critical care provides the opportunity to immediately treat individual wounds and lessen their severity. If successful, it restores 1 hit point per wound. This can be particularly beneficial when an injured party has suffered a fair number of individually minor injuries. Nursing allows natural healing to proceed at a quicker pace. For example, a 4 hit point wound ordinarily takes 10 days. 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 10 to heal. A first aid provider of at least novice mastery, this goes into their skill ranks here, can reduce this to 7 days. 3 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 equals 7. A master of first aid can even reduce a 4 hit point wound from 10 days to only 3 3/4 days. 2 plus 1 plus 1/2 plus 1/4 equals 3 3/4 days, i.e. 3 days and 18 hours. So if your character is lucky enough to know a cleric, stay on his good side. Clerics have access to certain divine spells that allow them to heal wounds instantly. Hit points restored from clerical healing apply to 1 wound at a time of the cleric's choice. Any extra healing gets applied to other wounds, again cleric's choice. Certain magical potions also provide immediate or improved healing. So there was a lot there, and arguably in the system that I'm kind of looking for, talking about 3 3/4 days and things like that worth of healing might be too much. But generally speaking, I do like this idea. I like the idea of tracking wounds individually. I like their idea of healing simultaneously, individual wounds healing simultaneously. I think there's something to be said for that. I kind of like it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and all of that jazz. It really helps a lot. But also, please check out The Cultists, the web series on this channel about modern-day D&D playing Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who just don't understand. Season 1 is on the channel now. But also, please check out my YouTube channel. I have over 150 videos on tabletop games and the fantasy genre. If you've enjoyed this video, you might enjoy many of them as well. I look forward to seeing you for them and many more videos to come. Later.